Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator, welcoming you to AV Plus, the podcast for the commercial AV integration industry. We have a very special podcast this week featuring Vicky Sanville, National Sales Manager for Public Sector Business with LG Business Solutions. She's a subject matter expert about learning spaces and how technology integrates within them. And we're going to learn a whole lot about both K through 12 and higher education learning environments and how LG technologies and technologies in general can outfit them and yield better educational outcomes. Thanks so much for joining us this week on AV Plus.
As always, please like and subscribe to our YouTube page. And please subscribe to the AV Plus podcast on Apple and on Spotify.
So happy to be joined today by Vicky Sanville, who is National Sales Manager for Public Sector Business with LG Business Solutions. Thank you so much, Vicky, for being here on the AV Plus podcast.
Thanks, Dan, for having me. I'm excited to have some interesting conversations today.
And I know it really will be an interesting conversation because we're talking about some important areas for commercial AV. In particular, we want to talk about learning spaces, education space. It's a very dynamic vertical market. We're seeing a lot of changes, not only in the post-pandemic atmosphere, but also obviously as technology evolves and as capabilities increase, and also as end user expectations and technology manager expectations increase. So let's talk a little bit about it. The definition of what a learning space is, I would say at least, is ever expanding. How can technology solution providers most effectively meet the needs of every kind of learning space?
Well, first off, I think technology providers need to be thinking about asking all of the questions first and understanding what the initiatives are in a learning space, and simply just going on a site walk, right, onto campus, I think is a really important first step before you even get into the speeds and feeds of technology, right? And I think that, what we at LG have discovered is that there is a unique initiative, not just in every school district, but in every school, like in every building. So if you're a school district that has 36 buildings, there may be very different things going on at certain buildings versus other buildings within the community. So I think it's understanding, number one, first, what their initiatives are beyond the technology, and then start bringing in solutions and identifying learning spaces in that area. I think what is really exciting about that is the classroom is not a box anymore, like probably you and I experienced. I think I probably was like cleaning erasers for like the blackboard. And it's evolved, of course, and there's smart TVs in classrooms and projectors in that box. But the box, the walls have been erased. And you've got many more advocates within a school system that are trying to capture the eyeballs of students because they all learn so differently. So in addition to the technology that can leverage, different pedagogies and applying those within a classroom, you've got maybe a librarian who wants to use that technology a totally different way on maybe glass in a building, or maybe hallways as students are walking to the cafeteria. You have after school advocates and leaders applying technology in cafeterias and maybe some labs, for esports or for virtual learning or for addressing a little bit of catch up on like learning loss. So I'm really excited when you go on a site walk and you realize, okay, the classroom is not just this box. The classroom is all, every kind of area inside as well as potentially outside.
The evolution really is amazing. And I agree with you, Vicky. I mean, I can think back to my own classroom days, elementary school. I still remember slide projection shows. I still remember cleaning the chalk off the blackboard. So it is an entirely different world. And I think a lot of times when people think about, the education vertical when it comes to integrated technology, a lot of times people immediately think of higher education. They think of, USC, they think of Joe Way, they think about, the higher ed opportunities. But you mentioned there in your answer, the district level than the K through 12 opportunities. And that's something that cannot be overlooked because their needs are greater than ever before as well. Their expectations, in the administration and the superintendent level are very high. So that cannot be overlooked, and they need their integrated technology as well.
Well, think about it. If you're only focused on leveraging technology from a higher ed perspective, you are being irresponsible as a company, I think, because you've got to prep youth like in K through 3. And starting to prep them for university level learning, as well as, they're at the university level, they're really focused on preparing you for the corporate world, right? So, number one, I think it's prepping, starting K through 3. And then of course it gets more and more advanced as you go to 4 to 6 and then into high school. But then also I think what's happening is that individual learning styles are being focused on a lot more than kind of back in our day. So technology has to be available and accessible to those teachers earlier on, so that they have diverse sets of opportunities to teach to those students. What I find so interesting is when you apply technology on a wall, or on a mobile cart that can move around, there's a student that engages and learns so much more attentively when they're walking up to a piece of technology, versus just sitting there at their desk, kind of holding their hands.
Mhm.
So it's giving those teachers the opportunities early on. And then the pressure's on. I mean, we saw this in the pandemic. There are amazing, parent communities out there making sure their students were learning for hybrid learning throughout the pandemic. But there are an incredible amount of children that did not have those access to resources, and that really rely on the community leaders. They really rely on after school programming. They rely on teachers who come in early to support them. So making sure that they have access to technology, whether it's hybrid or in person, to make sure that they keep up and they're supported by the community where maybe they don't have that same support at home is pretty critical.
It's really critical, and it's such an important point to emphasize. So often, in the enterprise space, for example, we talk about meeting equity and making sure that everyone feels like they're fully a part of a meeting, but education equity is something that is equally, if not more important. We have to recognize that, we don't know people's home situations, we don't know their socioeconomic situations, and having a broad utilization of technology, a broad conversance with technology, broad access to technology is absolutely essential. We don't want our classroom environments to exacerbate existing inequities where people are not familiar with the technology. Then maybe they're thrown in, but they don't have the proper training or the proper scaffolding to be able to benefit from it.
Well, it's actually quite interesting. I love that. It's like the proper training. If the one thing, LG thinks about every time that they broaden their portfolio in the education spaces, it's great to have all these bells and whistles, right? Super fancy stuff. But if it's so complicated that that no one, you need like years of training to use it, no one's going to use it, right? So it's pretty critical to make sure that the technology is easy to use and it's able to be used for the purpose of the student, the teacher, and the parents at home, or the caretaker at home. And number one, right? And then think about all the complicated technologies that are in a classroom. Just we've got our hardware piece, but there are AR and VR and furniture that goes into a classroom. So the interoperability of it also is pretty critical. So ease of use, interoperability, right? And then just making sure that it evolves over time and it's multi-use, I think is also key. It's pretty fascinating stuff, right? And then making sure that everybody is trained up to use it, but again, in an easy way, not in a, I have to pull up my, 1,000-page, kind of book to tell me exactly how to pull up Google Docs,
Yes, if there's anything we need to evolve beyond, it's the 1,000-page explainer of how to use a piece of technology. I don't think that flies anymore. We've talked about the importance at this point of technology in the classroom for all students. Again, you say from K-3 all the way up through higher education and beyond. Talk a little bit about the importance of having that product be diverse, not just like, one projector or one display or something like that, but kind of a large assortment of technology for different purposes and different students.
Yeah, so the assortment of technology I think is critical. A lot of our partners that are selling face to face to the school systems directly, they are being challenged with delivering more solutions as opposed to just like a box of technology. And so it's making certain that you have a variety of technology options for the end user, for the district, and their integration partners. Not only that fits like the use case, but also fits the budget and fits the timeline of delivery, and the actual environment. The goal for LG is to make sure that the hardware enhances the use of the space again, wherever it may be. But that again, it's not a distraction from a budget perspective or from, an integration perspective. And so for us, what we've really focused on is expanding the portfolio. There are still school districts that use projectors, and it's critical because that's just what their budget provides. They've become very inventive with what's going on in school systems. So when we go in and they want to stick with projectors, I want to make sure that they have that option. And again, we have projectors, we've got IT monitors, we've got 2-in-1 like laptop devices for the mobile teacher to walk around. We make sure we've got entry level smart TVs that are wired, so for a budget conscious school district, but like still durable, like bang on that TV, those kids run into things so much. But then you get into the more integrated, like fancier, like bells and whistles technology when you get into our full HD lineup or video walls or direct view LED technology. And like what's very critical to us, what we've seen is interactive technology, making sure school systems are really gung-ho about interactive technology. I think what's going to be really interesting about interactive boards in the future is they just want to use it as simply as possible as a big tablet. Engage the student, but then access all their documents, on web-based tools, like web-based learning management software is the big trend now, instead of having to buy interactive technology where there's like a license that you have to renew, the school district has to renew every year. That's not easy to do from a budget perspective.
Right.
So it's critical to make sure that you have all of those tools and options. And we've got some actually more exciting stuff launching next year that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about yet. But again, making sure you've got continued pieces and options for the school district, because for one, there could be one project. And we actually saw this in a classroom where they were thinking about just doing non-interactive. But what they ended up doing was they did some of our non-interactive displays, an interactive display in the front of room, but non-interactive around to include like the students that are learning from home.
Mhm.
One-to-one device for to allow mobility of the teacher. And then they had a projector just in case, because they needed to do certain math exercises from a projection screen. So it's making sure you've got one throat to choke in terms of an OEM instead of having 15 different OEMs in a classroom. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
from a maintenance perspective. I mean, that's just like mind-boggling if you had 15. So it's easier to drill it down to at least to 5 and then make sure they have US based service, right? Like LG does. So
No, it's absolutely critically important. And I love the fact that you're talking about all the different ways that, students learn best, they interact best, taking into account there may be some remote learners still and wanting to make sure that they're catered to. It really takes a very well thought out technology plan, doesn't it? And, when I was with Sound and Communications, before I was with Commercial Integrator, we focused so much on the integrated systems, which is kind of what you started with, the idea that it's not one product or one, SKU that's going to give you the solution. It's the pieces coming together, operating well together, interacting as they're intended to, a systems approach, which is really the core of an integrator's thought process. Can you talk a little bit more, just further detail about the idea that when you go to education environments, whether they're K through 12 or whether they're higher education, integrators, consultants, design engineers need to think about this as an ecosystem that should be interoperable and everything should work well together?
Yeah, and actually, so it's super critical, and LG is invested in this. Instead of just going to the school system and saying, okay, what's your refresh schedule? We've invested in a specifier team that works with the architects and the specifiers on new construction for schools. Because as you know, a lot of times the IT director doesn't even have a decision authority on the new builds and new constructions in school districts. So we've got that focus as well. And then, of course, on the retrofit side, we work with the school district directly. What's critical to think about is the variety of technology, but then making sure that it's all interoperable with what else goes into a learning environment. So for us, we have a lot of architects and engineers and end users really focused on leveraging our system on chip technology, WebOS. It's a digital signage platform. Very critical for them in terms of deploying messaging around wayfinding, safety, health news, and most importantly, and unfortunately, public safety. And so, and that's something we've really had to educate, especially on new construction. We've had to educate the architects and AV consultants on, is making sure that the variety of technology they have also is able to have a system on chip platform that then can be leveraged for us. At least I think we have like 450 different software partners that school systems use around the country, all in their unique ways. So you've got to make sure that whatever technology on the hardware you're speccing actually is interoperable with the software and collaboration tools and the control tools that are going into schools. And that's only going to get more complicated in the future. When you think about IoT in the classroom, it's not just going to be the AV anymore. It's the lighting, it's the HVAC, it is what's going on the property management side. We're really focused on making sure the back end asset management and the controllability of any of our pieces of technology can be controlled, not just interactive boards and their control system for property management or asset management, but all the parts and pieces of the puzzle. So it's super critical. It's something that's really eye-opening, because I think in the past folks have been used to, okay, this is what I got, this is my product roadmap, look at my beautiful lookbook. But if you just sit back and listen to the superintendent, the IT director, even the COO or the facilities director, you're seeing the melding, right? It used to be all very siloed, but now IT and AV and school systems are working together. And now the superintendent is really drilled down and focused on, okay, well, I've got my own initiatives that are on the learning side, or making sure, my tax base actually sends their kids to school here instead of a private school down the road. At a higher education level, they need to attract certain faculty to then attract certain students. So the tech plan for a campus is super critical as well. So it's all about listening, active listening, I think, at first, and then making sure that you've got a portfolio of technology that can fit in any of those spaces. And really it's just project by project, right? And at the end of the day, it's really funny for us. I've been doing this. I've been on my team. I stood up my team 2 years ago, and now we're seeing like LG schools, so you start with like a classroom, and then it goes into the hallway, and then it goes outside, and it's an after school program. And it's really an incredible impact. And it's because we have a versatile amount of technology that can go into a space and also work with whatever else is in that space to begin with.
That must be really, really satisfying to see that LG ecosystem kind of expanding out, as you say, from the classroom to the hallway to ancillary spaces, et cetera. And I agree with you, now more than ever, those lines between technology silos are blurring. The silos are kind of coming down. When I talk to integrators, as I do every day, I hear more and more that they want to be your technology solutions provider. They're not describing themselves some cases as an AV integrator, because they also do IT, they do structured cabling, they might dabble in security, all these various elements of a technology approach they're trying to have their hands in. And I think it reflects what you say is the nature on the ground, where just the silos are coming down. And that means there's a lot of opportunity for the commercial AV market, for the integration channel, and for companies like LG that have served it so well with technologies and solutions. But it does take something of a mindset shift, doesn't it? To embrace this idea of, I am going to be your technology solutions provider. I'm going to create an ecosystem or an environment for you, and I'm not going to limit myself to my little walled garden.
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? So we've all walked onto university campuses and districts where, you've got a team that's been working for 30 years on the technology applications,
Mhm.
and so it takes a lot, to convince them to be a little bit more of a risk taker. But that's where, honestly, from a solutions provider perspective, and this is LG's approach to it. We don't want to force anything upon you. We just want to continue like listening and giving you options. And it's my responsibility and my team's responsibility to make sure that we're educating all the key stakeholders on that campus. So then it makes it easier for, the team that's really been specifying what they know for 30 years. To be a little bit more comfortable because they've got the whole team around them go, yes, okay, we can take a risk, and really change the environment, how we set it up for learning and make a true impact on the student as opposed to, it just looking good in the classroom.
Yeah, yeah. So we've alluded to a number of different types of technologies and how each of them have a place in the modern classroom. You mentioned everything from projection to IoT related devices, interactive boards, things of that nature. Do you want to talk about any specific LG technologies you might not have alluded to yet, and then just talk about how they represent core technologies or great solutions for core technologies for the modern classroom?
Yeah, sure. So our core technologies in the classroom currently are TV signage. So we've got wired and wireless versions. They're really great budget-friendly applications, but highly durable. That's where we find school systems are transitioning off of projectors.
Mhm.
And it's easy because they still have those first cost challenges. They still have the school board approval, but then they last a much longer time. And we have 5-year warranties on all of our SKUs for education. But what I think is really interesting applications that are kind of in the forward thinking, besides TV signage, are video walls, LCD video walls. I know that everyone else thinks they're dying, but they're not dying in school systems. They're being used a lot more in wayfinding and learning environments outside the classroom, as well as for public safety. Public safety, cybersecurity, we have to be ready to go for the future for that. And so that's number one technology I want school systems and integrators to think about. Number two is interactive. Interactive's not going away, it's accelerating more. So the one thing that's going on in interactive space is LG has purposely made sure we are not doing any kind of software licensing. We are making sure we've got a board for all your needs, essential, highly durable, access all your learning management tools on a web-based technology, have a PC option if you have a specific license that you need. Just make it as easy as possible in and outside the classroom. Put it on a mobile cart, roll it down the hall, use it for your esports lab or a coaching board. We find that very critical, and making sure we're not tying the hands of the buyers with any kind of licensing agreement. Then third is something that I didn't really think was going to be much in K through 12. It's very popular in higher education. We're really excited about it, is our direct view LED technology. So a very nice transition off of bezeled video walls if you got the budget and you got the space. So in K through 12, we've got a really competitive product, a 136 diagonal, all-in-one direct view LED we put on a mobile cart. Several K through 12 systems are buying them because they want to utilize the technology in the cafeteria, roll it down to an auditorium. If there's an odd space like learning classroom or something like that, they can roll it in there too. You just lower it down, send it to the door, and it's good. Higher ed is buying those in multiples upon multiples because they're putting some on walls or putting some on carts. They want a lot of flexibility. And without the bezels, the picture is much more clear, especially in higher ed where they're looking at a lot more Excel spreadsheets. They're looking at a lot more conferencing tools. We just had a school that I can't announce, but their architecture school is applying it and showing off all of the work on the technologies to attract more donors to donate more money to the school. And obviously business schools really like the high quality technology in their spaces. So I think those are the main ones. We've got some really exciting IT products to talk about. So hopefully in early 2023, we can come back and chat about that because I think they're going to be game changers for LG in the education space. But we're really just excited that we have more and more options for the education buyer at any budget.
That's now the second tease in this podcast. The journalist in me is getting all excited to find out what it's going to be. I know you can't spill the beans yet, but exciting stuff to come from LG for sure. And I just want to talk about DirectView LED for a second. You know, obviously when people talk about the macroeconomy these days, they talk about rising gas prices, inflation. But I think DirectView LED is a little bit different in as much as isn't kind of the cost differential actually diminishing, where it's actually becoming more affordable comparatively?
More affordable, faster than I even realized or expected. So that's why, 6 months ago, I would have never even fathomed, we'd sell a couple in K through 12, but now it's even affordable for K through 12, which is really exciting because, again, thinking about the young learner, for students to have at such a young age access to really high quality technology, and for teachers to be able to use it in all sorts of ways, unique ways that we don't even think about. I mean, imagine looking at Google Earth, in a science or geology class, at such a young age. I mean, it's just it's a much greater impact, and it provides a lot more accessible visual learning to the student in the classroom. So yes, it's diminishing quickly. So give me a call or let me know. I'll make sure I get what you need.
I mean, my wife is a teacher, a middle school special ed science teacher, and I know for her it's all about achieving that learner engagement. And I think introducing technology into the classroom, especially something that can be as kind of almost eye candy, as in a sense, as DirectView LED, would just be incredibly effective, in my mind at least, to boost that learner engagement. As you say, kind of pull up Google Earth or whatever the case is. It's just so much better than those slide projector things of yesteryear that I remember. There's a lot of power, I think, at pedagogues' disposal if their districts and their institutions are able to invest in technology of that sort.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Think about it. It's the visual learner. It's the learner who likes to take quizzes. It's it's the learner who likes to engage physically and stand up and walk around the room. Maybe standing and walking to a piece of technology on a mobile cart. It's really exciting stuff. And it's critical for our economy, right? To make sure that these students are ready to go. I mean, I need them there because I'm only getting older.
I mean, it is critical. These are the technologies that are going to occupy our workspaces, our command and control centers, our offices, all throughout the future. These are the technologies that people will be using in the decades ahead. And the idea is we need to be familiar with them from an early age, able to work with them. As you say, LG is very focused on making them user-friendly, approachable, diminishing barriers to entry in terms of any kind of difficulty. So it's essential from, as you say, K through 12, even K through 3, to get people's hands on technology, get children familiar with it, and get them empowered to be able to use it in their adulthood.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm excited for what's to come, right? And I think what's really interesting, what you just said, is it's getting them, access to that technology early. And some of them, really get to experience it. Like, think about in high schools, some students are working with the IT and AV departments on, maintaining and adding new systems and learning tools to them, throughout the life that they spend on a school system. So it's also preparing them for maybe a career in the technology industry in the future too, and not just using the technology, which is pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Vicky, for joining me on the AV Plus podcast today. It was a really informative, almost half hour, and I really appreciate the time investment. For those who would like to learn more about some of the solutions we discussed, I do encourage you to go to www.lgsolutions.com. You'll be able to find out about the entire LG Solutions portfolio across technology categories and how those solutions and those technologies can serve modern classrooms, whether they're K through 12 or higher education and beyond. So thank you so much, Vicky, for being here. Again, a really informative half hour, and I'm grateful for you being on the AV Plus podcast.
Thanks, Dan. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
So happy to have been joined again by Vicky Sanville, National Sales Manager for Public Sector Business with LG Business Solutions. My name is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator. Please join us each and every Friday for the AV Plus podcast, and check out commercialintegrator.com regularly for more updates and thought leadership just like this. Have a great day.